Today is March 5th, 2024. Board of County Commissioners Workshop will convene. We'll call it to order. If we could rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I gladly will turn it over to our county manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today is our annual transportation priorities. A few things that are going to be a little bit different than normal is we're going to break out and start reporting on resurfacing. So near the end of the presentation, we'll be talking about resurfacing, and we'll include that from now on in the presentation moving forward. There is an item in Tier 1 that we're proposing to move out, which would be the Lehigh resurfacing. Since it's a major maintenance project, we're recommending that we move it out and just have it under the resurfacing component. But you'll see that when we move forward. Also today, we're going to talk about where we are in Tier 1. Most of the projects are underway. The one that isn't, there's a reason why, and Rob will get into it, but it is Midpoint Bridge. And then we'll start talking about where we're at in the Tier 2. We have 2 PD&Es underway. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rob Price with DOT. We're excited to join you today to discuss the 2024 transportation priorities. Our agenda today includes 3 parts. First, we want to talk about all the great things that have been happening since this time last year. Next, we'll get into our updated recommendations for this coming year. And then we'll wrap up with a brief discussion on funding. The main questions we are seeking input from the board on include whether you agree with our proposed transportation priorities and whether you have any additional input or questions for us to address. We wanted to provide some highlights over the last few years to start things off. As you will recall, we completed 4-laning of Homestead Road from Alabama Road to Sunrise Boulevard in July of 2020. We also completed the southern phase of the Burnt Store Road 4-laning in April of last year. That completed a 4-lane widening from Pine Island Road to Van Buren Street in Cape Coral. On Corkscrew Road, Phase 1 of that widening was from Ben Hill Griffin Parkway to Bellaterra Boulevard, and it's nearing completion later this month. Sorry, I went a slide too far. Estero Boulevard improvements were also completed in August of 2022. We reconstructed Estero Boulevard with new utility lines, improved sidewalks, drainage, and other related safety improvements. We completed the first roundabout on Gateway Boulevard at Commerce Lakes Drive in September of 21. Another roundabout at Griffin Drive is currently nearing completion. Finally, we also completed the first phase of Alico Road widening from Ben Hill Griffin Parkway to Airport Hall Road in June of 21 in anticipation of the future Alico Connector project. These 6 projects represent a total construction cost of $184 million. Next, we wanted to highlight all of the projects that are currently under construction. As I mentioned, the roundabout at Gateway Boulevard and Griffin Drive will be complete this month with a ribbon cutting scheduled for March 28th. We hope to see you all there. This is a $4.7 million intersection safety project that was awarded on January 17th of 23 and will be completed ahead of schedule. Next, the board awarded a $27 million contract for Phase 1 of the top priority 3 Oaks Parkway extension project on May 16th of 23, and construction on that project is well underway. The first phase is expected to be completed in the spring of 26. Phases 2 and the Daniels Parkway 8-laning are 90% designed at this time, and we anticipate construction starting on these phases by middle of next year. The board also awarded construction of the Big Carlos Pass Bridge replacement in February of 23. This is a $104 million project. Construction began in June of 23 with completion slated for the summer of 26. Recently, the board also awarded construction of the Ortez Avenue 4-laning from Colonial Boulevard to MLK. This is a $35 million project with construction beginning in April. Targeted completion for this project is April of '26. We're currently also working with FDOT on the replacement of the Little Pine Island Bridge in Matlacha. The bridge was originally slated for replacement in 2027, but after sustaining damage from Hurricane Ian, the state and county worked together to advance replacement of the bridge to this summer at a cost of $2.5 million to Lee County currently. Construction is also underway on the three-laning of Littleton Road from the roundabout at Corbett Road east to US 41. The board awarded this contract in October, and the construction is expected to finish in the summer of 2025. Finally, the board also awarded the contract for Phase 2 of the widening of Corkscrew Road from Bellaterra Boulevard to Alico Road in December. Notice to proceed was issued last month, and we expect a 2-year construction timeline with completion slated for February of '26. In addition to what's under construction, we also want to highlight projects that are currently in the design or PD&E phase. The continuation of the Three Oaks Parkway extension, along with the 8-laning that we talked about of Daniels Parkway, is at 90% design currently. We're expecting final plans later this year, and we are expecting those construction start dates to be middle of next year for those 2 phases. The Alico Connector is another project that we're really excited about. The widening from Airport Hall Road to Green Meadow is 90% designed now, and we hope to award the construction of this phase later this year. The future connection of Alico Road to State Road 82 and Sunshine Boulevard, including a 4-laning of Sunshine Boulevard from State Road 82 north to Southwest 23rd Street, is at 30% currently. We anticipate construction of these phases to begin 18 months after the widening of the existing Alico Road section starts due to the additional permitting efforts that are needed. We're nearing a public hearing on the PD&E phase for the Cape Coral Bridge replacement later this year as well. That project's moving forward to 60% design over the next 12 months, at which point we will come back to the board with a recommendation on how to deliver the project. Finally, we have FDOT overseeing the PD&E phases for the rest of the Burnt Store Road widening from Van Buren Street north to the Charlotte County line. FDOT and the county decided to take this project to 60% design through the PD&E phase with the development of a design-build criteria package to make the project shovel-ready for design-build construction. We expect to go after any grant opportunities available to deliver the project with the support of the state. We wanted to talk individually about some of the projects that are under construction, and here starts a series of those slides. As discussed, the Three Oaks Parkway extension is the top priority on the board's rankings, and the first phase is currently underway. The box culvert over the Fiddlesticks Canal is largely complete, so we're now able to move material from the south to the north through the alignment. Phase 2 and the Daniels widening are at 90%, and we anticipate construction beginning on those phases sometime next year. The project in total is estimated to cost over $150 million, with completion expected in 2028. This slide shows the progress that's been made on the Big Carlos Pass Bridge replacement. The project is the number 2 priority from last year's tiers and is valued at $105 million for construction. The construction activity started in June of 2023 with a 3-year delivery timeline. The board recently awarded the 4-laning construction of Ortez Avenue from Colonial Boulevard north to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in February. Construction is expected to begin in April on this project with a 2-year delivery schedule. This is the number 4 priority of the board's last transportation tiers. Construction is valued at $35 million. This slide highlights the Littleton Road 3-laning project. The board rated this project as the number 6 priority in last year's Tier 1, and the construction contract of $23 million was awarded by the board in October. Notice to proceed was issued in January with an 18-month delivery timeline. The second phase of Corkscrew Road widening was the number 7 priority of the board in last year's tier discussion. The contract was awarded by the board in December. The total value of both phases of Corkscrew Road totals $60 million. Phase 2 construction began in February of this year with a 2-year delivery schedule. So this is a familiar slide that the board's seen before. These are the criteria used to prioritize projects in our transportation tiers. We evaluate every project based on the preservation of the asset, level of service deficiencies, existing or forecast, continuity of our transportation network, multimodal value, grant participation, and most importantly to DOT, safety. This slide shows the updated Tier 1 project scores. We have not reordered the projects by the updated score, but we do show 2 fewer Tier 1 projects this year. First of all, the second phase of the Ortez Avenue widening from MLK to Luckett Road scored lower than several Tier 2 projects, so we are showing that unfunded project in Tier 2. If you'll remember last year, it went from funded to unfunded in Tier 1. It was down towards the bottom of Tier 1. Secondly, the Hickory Bridge replacements was previously the very last project in Tier 1, and based on its score, it now falls to the Tier 2 range because of the lack of funding to construct it. But the project is still moving forward as we approved beginning the PD&E phase this morning. As some of these active Tier 1 projects are completed, we will show the Hickory Bridges as a Tier 1 project in the coming years. Additionally, we want to further discuss the Lehigh Acres paving project at number 3. This project is really a major maintenance project and not a CIP project. So we are proposing to remove this from the tier rankings moving forward, but we will add a slide discussing resurfacing to our presentation annually. Here we've highlighted the top 7 projects, including that little Lehigh Acres paving project. We wanted to detail all of these throughout the presentation. All of these projects are currently in some form of construction right now. Also, 3 of the remaining Tier 1 projects are currently under design or PD&E phases. The only Tier 1 project we have not initiated a phase on yet to date is the Midpoint Bridge widening, because we wish to time the construction of that project soon after completion of the Cape Coral Bridge. 9 of the Tier 1 projects are shown as fully funded in our Tier 1. So this slide shows our proposed updated Tier 2 rankings. As I stated earlier, you will see the second phase of the Ortez Avenue widening from MLK to Luckett Road here, along with the Hickory Bridge replacement projects at numbers 15 and 14 respectively. A particular note on Tier 2 are 3 sections of Sunshine Boulevard, which we'll highlight here. I'll talk more about Sunshine Boulevard at the next slide. I also want to highlight the Hickory Bridges and Burnt Store Road projects in Tier 2. We moved forward with the local funding agreement this morning on the Hickory Bridges for a PD&E study, and Burnt Store Road PD&E is already nearing completion. I mention these projects just to demonstrate that we do have Tier 2 projects that are in some phase of project development. However, I will point out the total estimated cost of the Tier 2 projects shown at the bottom is $1.36 billion, and only $41 million of that has been budgeted or spent to date. On this slide, I want to go a little bit more in depth on 3 corridors that show up in Tier 2. This map shows Lehigh Acres to the north of Lee Boulevard all the way to Palm Beach, including the Buckingham area. Currently, we're starting to see forecasted level of service deficiencies along the only 2 connections from this area of Lehigh Acres to the north, Buckingham Road and Joel Boulevard. There are 2 arterial roadways, and we are starting to see the need to address capacity on these roads. This is where Sunshine Boulevard comes in. We have the Alico Connector project in Tier 1 that ties into the southern portion of Sunshine Boulevard and includes widening of Sunshine to 23rd Street Southwest. Initially, our plan was to carry the widening to the north on the existing two-lane sections until we got to 75th Street, and then proceed with the Sunshine Extension. Last year, DOT commissioned a study after the Sunshine Extension was added to the long-range plan. We wanted to know two things. One, would the Sunshine Extension provide enough relief to Buckingham Road and Joel Boulevard? And two, would the two-lane sections of existing Sunshine Boulevard function acceptably in the interim if we built the four-lane extension first? The study showed us that the delivery of the Sunshine Extension as the next phase will be necessary to provide relief to both Buckingham Road and Joel Boulevard, and the two-lane sections of existing Sunshine Boulevard will continue to operate acceptably if we advance the extension first. I've also highlighted a property that you'll see in the third inset here in the southwest corner of Joel Boulevard and Tuckahoe Road. That property is owned by the Lee County School District. They have plans to build a new high school in 2028 and a new middle school in 2030 on this property. Based on these factors, we have adjusted the scoring on Sunshine Boulevard Extension, on Buckingham Road, and on Joel Boulevard to reflect the results of the study that we had performed. Additionally, we've entered into conversations with the school district to discuss needed improvements along the frontage of Joel Boulevard. We're seeking concurrence from the board on how we have scored these projects. However, in recognition of our previous plan to widen the other sections, the existing two-lane sections of Sunshine Boulevard, we have also identified potential right-of-way constraints along the two-lane sections of Sunshine. You will remember that we brought forward a framework agreement with Lamson to coordinate use of their canal rights-of-way where Sunshine Boulevard is adjacent to the canal. However, the section does not have a canal adjacent to it. We began discussions with county lands to advance right-of-way acquisition along this stretch of Sunshine Boulevard through coordination with county lands. We've closed on the property highlighted in blue. We are under contract on the properties that are hatched in black. We are also in negotiations on the properties that are hatched in red, and we've made inquiries on the property shaded in black. On this slide, we have our Tier 3 projects. Future six-laning of sections of Corkscrew Road head this list. There are also some bridge replacements that will be necessary in Tier 3. Additionally, there is a future grade-separated intersection at Veterans Parkway and Santa Barbara Boulevard in this tier. At the bottom of this table, we summarize the cost of all three tiers to the tune of nearly $4 billion. $1 billion, just under $1 billion of that is funded or budgeted to date. We've talked about this a lot in the past, so we wanted to highlight a little bit of how we have expedited some of our. By our discussion on Sunshine Boulevard, we're advancing right-of-way acquisition where possible to help deliver projects faster. We're also working on some advanced right-of-way acquisition on Burnt Store Road North. That's under PD&E now. Additionally, we aggressively phase our projects to get some level of construction moving while we await right-of-way acquisition and permitting efforts to be completed. Examples of this are Estero Boulevard, Burnt Store Road's first three phases, the Three Oaks Parkway extension, the Alico Connector, and Corkscrew Road. We've also begun to use design-build delivery as an option to accelerate projects. The Hickory Bridges, we expect the PD&E to include 60% design with the development of a design-build criteria package. The same can also be said for the Burnt Store North PD&E underway by the state. You'll also remember that we incorporated this as an option on the Cape Coral Bridge. When we reach 60% design, we will come back to the board with a recommendation to move the project forward as either a conventional design bid build project or to shift to a design build with development of a design build criteria package. On this slide, we wanted to discuss funding options for the Cape Coral Bridge. The total cost to design, construct, and inspect the Cape Coral Bridge is estimated at $480 million. And only $102 million of that is currently funded. That leaves a shortfall of just under $380 million. for the 2027 construction timeline of this project. We've laid out some potential funding options here. We expect to collect $80 million in surplus toll revenue by 2027. Additionally, we have set this project up for potential grant funding by including a PD&E phase. An example grant opportunity would be the Federal Large Bridge Infrastructure Program, which could fund around $50 million of the project. We've also envisioned funding the remainder of this project through debt financing. To be ready to finance the balance through debt, we created the timeline at the bottom of the slide, working back from a 2027 construction commencement. So we would need to perform the investment-grade traffic and revenue report from starting in February of 2025, with completion expected in February of 26, so that we could begin debt financing in June of 26 with a closing date of November. The investment-grade traffic and revenue report is only good for 1 year, so we don't want to start it too early. So we already talked a little bit about bringing forward a slide on resurfacing every year. This slide summarizes the cost increases we've seen over the last several years. The price of asphalt has increased 30 to 40% over the last few years, from $80 a ton to $125 a ton. Just from 2020, mostly due to increased labor and fuel costs. As you will remember, we suspended our resurfacing program during the pandemic and temporarily again after Hurricane Ian. We used the downtime to do a wholesale reevaluation of our pavement conditions. We completed that effort last fall, and in order to get pavement conditions back to core levels, we need an additional $18 million per year for a total of $28 million per year over the next 5 years. Alternatively, we could account for the increase in costs for asphalt and the cost increases we're seeing to do ADA upgrades with the addition of $7.5 million. Sorry, I went one slide too far. With the addition of $7.5 million to our resurfacing budget, for a total of $17.5 million a year. This still will leave us with a deficit of $60 million in 5 years, but it will help us keep up with rising costs. Now we'll go back to the questions. So back to our original questions. We're asking the board if you agree with our transportation priorities as laid out in this presentation. Also, do you agree with us bringing forward a $7.5 million reserve transfer to some needs? And finally, are there any other questions or input from the board? We did have one more slide that we want to talk about how we're coordinating with our community engagement team to publicize our CIP. Project information is listed on our website at www.legov.com/DOT under the Project Plans subheading. Every active project has a website listed here. There are project plans, maps, and other various information included on these links. Also, we urge the public to sign up for the county newsletter, where we share all of our latest Lee County news, including project-related updates. We also urge the public to follow our social media pages on Facebook at facebook.com/Lee County FLBOCC, and follow us on our YouTube feed, where you can watch this meeting live or recorded. We'll open up for any questions. Yep.
Rob, I got a couple quick ones, I think. This recent issue with the Corps taking over permitting and stuff, is that, when you start looking at tiers and timing and stuff, this has only to do with water and endangered species. Do we see any further delays in achieving some of these goals based on permitting?
So the question that the commissioner asked was regarding the 404 permit. So as of right now, we're seeing 2 projects that were currently under review by DEP that were going through the 404 review process. That was Alico Road, Phase 1, the widening of the existing section of Alico, and then the Daniels Parkway widening, part of the Three Oaks extension. We're working closely with our community development team and our consultants on those projects to see what we can do about getting those permits I know we've submitted the applications to the Corps on the Alico project already, and we did get word last week that the Corps is going to be receiving those applications. So our goal is to have kind of, if DEP is going to continue to review them, we'll have the reviews running concurrently through the Army Corps. And when the judge decides what's going to happen in the next couple weeks and who actually has the authority, we expect to have those permits get issued. It may delay the projects by a few months, maybe half a year, but we expect them to be, we're working through it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Second question I had was, we're taking out resurfacing and making that, if I understand it, a separate line item? Is that correct? Within that line item, are we going to have tiers of priorities in that?
No, so what we do on our resurfacing budget, it's a major maintenance project, so we don't really break that down by tiers, but we have a full-on map of all the pavement conditions throughout the county, and our goal is to address the most efficient roadways first.
Okay. Last question I had was on the Hickory bridges. Is the intent to put back what was there, or are we going to make any additional modifications to those bridges, potentially?
So those were some aging bridges that were already being slated for and looked at for replacement. The plan is not to widen those bridges, but we will include pathways on those bridges per current day standards.
Okay. All right.
So Commissioner Sandelli, if I can provide some clarification. On resurfacing, the only thing that we're doing differently is in Tier 1, number 3 is Lehigh resurfacing. It's been in the tiers for years. We're going to pull that out specifically and create essentially a conversation on resurfacing every year. So that's the only thing that's actually moving out of the tiers. Resurfacing is a general issue that we have. To Rob's point, the costs continue to increase, so we have a little bit of a deficit as we run forward each year, but we're trying to address that. And we'll have, obviously, we're coming out of the hurricane and revenues are a little bit different than they've been in the past, a little lower than anticipated. But we hope to be able to work out of that and address that in future years, how we're gonna correct that deficit.
Any other questions?
Rob, thank you for the information. Obviously, transportation is a big topic. This always happens this time of year with spring training. Everybody's back in town. Again, thank you. As we all talked about over the years, try to expedite the process, and I think we've done a good job of that. Obviously, it's this big list. It keeps getting bigger, and of course, the funding keeps going up because everything gets more expensive every day. Is there anything you need us to do from our level, is working with the state and feds to help any of these projects to expedite, besides obviously the court ruling, the 404 decision? Is there anything else staff needs from us to help you guys do your job more efficiently and faster?
I think we have a really good framework set up, and projects are starting to move. I can't think of anything that would help us accelerate any of these projects beyond what we're doing now.
I've been out there this month. I know we started the next phase of Corkscrew. I know Ray's out there every day, Commissioner Sandelli. But is that first project, is that all done now with Cougar? Is that all complete? They're still doing some work out there?
They're slated for completion at the end of the month. Their contract runs through the end of March. As of right now, we believe they will be completed.
So last time I was out there, the westbound lanes just past Wild Blue coming in before the wildlife corridor, they were still paving that. There was still dirt. Is that coming along pretty good now? Is it first set of pavement down there on the westbound lanes between Wild Blue and the wildlife corridor?
They're slated for final lift of asphalt, I believe, on the 10th.
Okay.
Is the plan right now. We were out there last week working with them, looking at some of the concrete in anticipation of the final lift of asphalt. So we're working through punch lists, starting to create punch lists and get stuff over to Cougar to address prior to paving.
Okay, great. And I see Three Oaks, obviously, that you can see, everybody can see that now from the interstate. That's all coming along, and those box culverts are in the canal there. That's coming along, and that's something I talked about earlier to the media about how that's going to be, that transportation network is going to help relieve Daniels. I mean, in 3 years, we're going to have 16 lanes of traffic from Corkscrew north to the Daniels, between the 4 lanes on Three Oaks, 8 lanes of 75 once that's done with the FDOT, and then the 4 lanes of tree line. We're going to have 16 lanes. I mean, pretty crazy that we have that much traffic in that one corridor, north and southbound. It will probably be pretty full most of the time of the day. But yeah, but my message is we're keeping up with it. Is just have to remind myself, look back in the pictures of 41 in 1973, standing behind dump trucks on 41 when it was still bumper-to-bumper traffic on 41 in 1973. So trying to keep up with that, but it's just we got the messaging. We got to try to get that message out because there's a lot of good projects here. But again, going back to messaging, people wondering what we're doing, and some people think there's there's no planning, but there is planning. We all know it, and we have Don here from MPO, and between the MPO and what the county's doing, the state, there's a lot of projects being planned and being implemented. We got to do a better job getting that message out so people don't say, well, what are you guys actually doing? So I just had Denny Grimes contact me last week, who's doing the market trends, and pretty much saying, is there any planning being done with traffic? Of course there's planning being done with traffic. Here's what we're doing. And a lot of people are not aware, but they don't look at our website to see these projects, which they're there, but we just had to make sure we get that message out. Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Sure. Commissioner, just to address the question you had about help, I think once we get a determination of whether this is going to run through Army Corps or DEP, if it's DEP, we probably will need to address the mitigation component later. As you remember, we did have some issues with mitigation previously with DEP, so we probably have to go back and address that if it stays with the state. So I just want to throw that back on the table. That's not over if it goes back to the state. Or stays with the state, I apologize.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, Randy and Rob, great presentation. Thank you for all the work that you guys have done. Very, rewarding, gratifying to see so many projects that we've talked about for so long starting to really move forward and see the earth moving and things like that. So great job, great recap, good pictures, great visuals. As we were going through it, one question that definitely came to my mind on the Cape Coral Bridge funding slide, as we were looking at that, when will you know if the existing toll would be enough to cover the unfunded project cost?
I think that's what we're going to find from that investment grade traffic and revenue report. That's why we're going to commission that study.
Okay.
Pete, do you have anything to add?
No, Commissioner, yeah, that's the reason for that study. And it'd be really speculative on my part now to say anything about that. I think one thing we're going to look at when we get into that study and we talk to the consultants is also how this construction project, the Cape Coral Bridge, interacts with the Midpoint Bridge, which we want to do completely following. So I think what we want them to do is probably show us a number of alternatives that show the debt schedules, and then how that would be layered in if you're going to do a debt schedule also for the Midpoint Bridge, which it's not if you are, we will have to. So how that's layered together, and then at that point, then we'll have a better idea of what the toll needs to be.
And I appreciate that answer. The next question I had was just really about the transportation priorities. I think the ranking criteria looks fantastic. It's the ranking criteria that we've used for years. I'll just say simply, every single day, not a day goes by that I hear traffic, and to the point where there you hear the comments. People are like, "It's so full out there, I'm ready to move away." Comments, and so. Anything we could do to help put more weight in our ranking criteria on the congestion and the levels of service, I would be supportive of, because I think that's what the people are telling me right now. That's if I were to be their representative voice, that's what they're telling me. But I certainly wouldn't want to change the rules of engagement in the middle of the game. The criteria we have is the criteria we've been operating under for a while, but certainly I think that more weight towards congestion relief or levels of services is definitely warranted right now based on the feedback from the community. And then the last thing, I guess I had a question, Pete, is the $7.5 million in reserves that we're talking about for Lehigh paving, is that coming from the general fund?
Yeah, Commissioners, if you want us to move forward with that, I was looking at maybe dipping into a couple fund balances, a combination of general fund and unincorporated MSTU. Unincorporated MSTU has good reserves for a fund that size, So I didn't want the general fund to take the complete hit on that, because we don't want to run through all of our excess reserves before we know exactly what we're going to have next year.
Well, that
So-
kind of started to answer my next question,
Yeah.
is do we have the capacity to handle that?
We do now, yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that answers the questions I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I agree with that too. It was obviously, we remember years ago, 10 years ago, we were 60 years behind paving Lehigh Acres or Smith Road. So we've been doing a good job the last 8, 10 years with that program. So trying to catch up to that threshold, and I'd rather, it's great having the reserve money, but we need to put that back in the community to help the people that live out there, because some of those roads are really bad. So definitely support that.
So, does everybody agree with the questions that are up there?
Yes.
I believe you have consensus. Mr. County Manager, I think the other issue is when we get some of these studies in front of us, I think funding is going to be the monkey in the room.
Correct.
I mean, it's just, you look at the cost, you look at where they're going, you know, when you get into billions, there's just only so many reserves and so many funding vehicles that are going to be out there. So it's going to be a challenge.
On that note, I mean, going if I could, Chairman. Second and third part of that whole phase is yearly maintenance. We've seen a lot more, obviously, potholes with increased traffic, weather. Is obviously, I know, I think we already purchased a second pothole truck to go out there, and second crew to go out there. I know it was coming in the budget, or it did come in the budget. How are we doing as far as future maintenance of the current road structures that's already in place? As we see the increased traffic, we see deterioration of the roads.
Yeah, we are
Repaving.
working to increase our staff on the patching side to address some of the needs out there. Having the extra $7.5 million for resurfacing is going to help a lot. We'll be able to address some of the roads in worse shape over the next couple years. And it'll help us get back a little bit where we were.
Okay, great, thank you.
Pete, one last question. I know we didn't fund it this past cycle of GIF, but we're going to go back to funding GIF.
Commissioner, that's the intention, unless some unforeseen circumstances. If it was real, so we reinstated GIF. If it got real tight next year due to whatever obligations, a possibility could we say we'd suspend it and then try to reinstate it, because we come out usually better on reserves than what we forecast for a number of reasons.
Just to follow up, and that number was in the 12s, right? 12 million?
13.7 million.
13.7. So obviously taking $7.5 million out of reserves, since we didn't fund GIF, is the same. I mean, it certainly it would be a similar pot of money if we funded GIF. We just take it out of there. So in a sense, we're funding GIF to some degree. Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments? Thank you, Rob. I appreciate the awesome presentation. Thanks for the rankings and all, and look forward to some of the information